Hey, good morning. This is Ben with Studio on the Lake once again. This is beginner series, beginner wood carving series, and this is the third in this series. And this one's talking about gouges. Number one talks about wood. Number two talks about knives. This one is gouges. Here's a mishmash of gouges that I use. The two at the top are relatively new. Hard to tell because I do scrape the handles off. I like to grab. It's a big piece of basswood. There's those two that come in a set. That's my recommended carving set. If you go back and look through the videos, I'll probably redo that. Trying to figure out what the shape looks like. Stab it down into the wood like that. We'll talk about sweep and different numbers and that sort of thing later on. Using the same piece of bass scrap wood there. You can see how I hold that chisel. The smaller ones, I'm kind of holding them like a pencil. Now, if I really want to get into the meat of it, I'll put them in my hand. It's kind of an overhand. I have primarily three different ways to hold those chisels. That is one method. There's a pencil grip, probably my preferred for the smaller pieces. I don't talk too much about safety. Keep your hand that's not doing any work away from the front of the knife. Does that make sense? Don't push through. Keep your tools sharp. And if you like to, we talked about before, they do make a glove that'll go on your offhand. It's asbestos or Kevlar, wire mesh, and keeps you from stabbing yourself or slicing through. There's a fine gouge. That's how it's utilized. I am cutting with the grain. They will cut a cross grain, although not as well. You have a tendency to be tearing one side of the grain and the other side's cutting. Here's an older one, antique tool. Probably picked that up in Germany somewhere at Trodelmart. What's kind of neat is a lot of these have initials and that sort of thing on them. I put my initials on the newer tools, but not the older ones. You can see that that's got a little different sweep. We'll talk about that later. And takes a little bit more of a bite. I don't know how to explain it, but if you were to buy two identical new chisels, you would like, from the same manufacturer, you would like one better than the other one. Just some fluke in either the angle that it was sharpened, the hardness of it, something unique about one versus the other. You'll be able to pick a favorite. I have never found two chisels to be the same. So you'll develop your collection if you start doing this, and have a whole bunch of ones that you don't really use. That happens to be one that I don't use a whole lot. I think probably the reason why is I've got others that I like in that same size. I've never bothered to go through and sharpen in those. If you watch the first series, the second series, and now are up to this part, number 5, we'll talk about sharpening, and number 4 is going to be a reiteration of how to hold these tools in the different shapes that I use. That's a stop cut, put in there with a bench knife. And what it does is it keeps that gouge from running on down through. There's two things I do here. I'm not showing you with this. Two-handed grip, a little bit of pressure. That left hand is not actually pushing. It's actually pulling back. Does that make sense? I use it kind of as a stop so that I don't go running off on the end. Put the stop cut just a little bit deeper. And come back to the chisel. Pick one that works easy. I suppose I should talk it in one of these videos about holding your work down. I like to sit in my lap and sit and carve in my lap in a chair. TV going on in the background of the studio and the fire running. Some of the bigger stuff, I will put it in a vise up on the bench, or use a bench dog and hold down, and that's certainly worthwhile, especially when you get to these bigger chisels. There's the pattern of that one. This thing's a monster. I don't know what I use that occasionally on large projects. Notice I got out the hammer before. I was using my hand kind of as a hammer on the end. That one I decided I needed my little rubber hammer. I don't use wooden mauls. I use cheap $4 smaller rubber hammers, and I cut the handle off so that they're a little bit shorter. Seem to work better for me. There's another one of my favorite tools. I will not go into the different names and that sort of thing. You can research that online. Most of the high-end manufacturers make quality tools. Don't buy the cheap Chinese sets. If it looks too good to be true, it is. They won't hold an edge. You'll break them, and they're primarily garbage. If you want to try those, by all means, pick them up at a garage sale somewhere. They don't work. These smaller chisels you can get, the one laying up there on the top, you can pick up a good set for between $40 and $60. Those two in the middle. All right, something unique here. We had gouges. These are now veiners. And it's just kind of an offshoot. Many people swear by veiners. They use them for outlining, cutting in hairs, that sort of things. You can see the V shape there is what's going on. They really are a pain in the butt to sharpen. You've got two edges. You don't want to mess with the bottom of that V, and you always end up with a little bump sticking out between the two of them. With the grain, cuts fine. It does a line. People use these for stop cuts. They'll draw their pattern on there. I'm going to do a really bad example here. Makes no sense. You got to put a circle in there because that's where your money starts to come in. Now, if I wanted to outline that thing right there and use different stop cuts or leave part of it proud, that sort of thing, there's what the veiner does. Comes through. Works fine when you're running with the grain. Works absolutely terrible across the grain or any combination in the middle. You'll notice on the upper left-hand corner of that edge, as it's coming around, it's actually tearing into the wood, whereas on the bottom part, it's slicing. Now, notice what I did with the knife. I came onto that grain. I'm cutting with the grain. That's why I don't like veiners. They have to be extremely sharp to work on that cross grain. And I can do the same thing just as quick with a bench knife. And later on, I'll continue this on into another 5 probably sets of videos after this, and we'll talk about power carving. And my power carvers, I have 2 of them. They're identical. One's a 30,000, one's a 40,000. And they have wood burners on them, and with the decoys I do a lot of wood burning. I've taken to a heavy wood burning pen to do the stop cuts and the outlines. Just a technique that I've developed. A little bit bigger veiner while I was yakking there. This one here is kind of a mutation, and I'll draw it on there in a second. If you can kind of see what I've got going here with the pattern. It's completely a U shape as opposed to a V shape, but it's very pronounced, and it'll take quite a channel out of there, and it looks kind of like that. It's a specialty tool. You may develop a like for those. Here's your different shapes. You start looking up at fishtails. You've seen a couple of those. V, There you go. That'll give you the definitive. Here's a manufacturer and the different sizes. Notice they say size and sweep. Sweep is the number on there. Two numbers, number 3, number 2 is a size, and then you go down to different sweeps. And that's it pretty much in a quick nutshell. If you haven't, by all means, go back and check out number 1 and number 2. This is number 2. Talks about the bench knives. These are just rudimentary. I'm not spending a whole lot of time on this. I'm just trying to give you a quick overview. Everybody has an internet nowadays and can check into this. Here's a piece of basswood. Number 1, the beginner series video talks about wood and wood selection, various different kinds. This just happens to be the basswood brief. By all means, subscribe, like, comment, and share these videos. Thanks. This band was Studio on the Lake.